Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got some really interesting source material you sent over, and today we're diving into part two of the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. That's the January 2023 version 1.0.
That's right. Yeah, if part one sort of set the scene, part two is, well, the engine room, really. It gives you the practical bits, the core functions, and this idea of profiles. It shows organizations how to, move from just talking about AI risk to actually doing something about it.
Okay, so our mission here is pretty clear. Unpack these sections for you, the listener. We want you to get not just what they are, but how they fit together, why they're set up this way.
And ultimately, how they help build AI that's, innovative but also trustworthy, something
Yeah.
you can actually rely on.
Exactly. All right, let's get into it.
So part two is called Core and Profiles. And the core, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the foundation. NIST lays out these outcomes and actions, practical steps, to help manage AI risks and really cultivate those trustworthy AI characteristics we talked about.
And this core has four main functions, right? High-level ones. I see govern, map, measure, and manage.
Yep, those are the big four. Think of them as maybe key activities or phases in managing AI risk.
Are they strictly linear, like step one, step two?
Not exactly. The framework is clear on this. Govern is described as cross-cutting. It's kind of always there, underpinning everything else.
Okay, so it's foundational.
Right. Then map, measure, and manage. They can be sequential, and often are, but you might loop back. They're more contextual, iterative. It depends on the situation.
So it's not a rigid checklist you just tick off once.
Definitely not. NIST emphasizes flexibility. You adapt these functions based on your specific AI system, where it is in its life cycle, your organization's resources, risk tolerance, all that stuff.
Got it. And something that jumped out at me early in this section was the emphasis on who should be involved in this.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The framework really hammers this home. You need diverse perspectives to make these functions work properly.
Meaning-
Well, yes, different demographic backgrounds, but also different types of expertise. You need your engineers, sure, but also ethicists, lawyers, people who actually understand the domain the AI is being used in, maybe even user representatives or people from affected communities.
Because different people spot different risks.
Exactly. That diversity helps you see potential problems or biases that, a purely technical team might completely miss. Avoids that narrow lens.
That makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't want only engineers deciding what counts as fair, for example. Okay, so let's dig into that first function, the cross-cutting one. Govern.
Right. Govern. You could argue it's the most critical place to start. It's all about setting up the organization itself to handle AI risk. Cultivating a culture where thinking about risk and trustworthiness is just baked in.
Not an afterthought.
Not an afterthought. It's where you define the structures, the policies, the processes, who's accountable for what. Ideally, before you dive deep into a specific AI project.
So kind of getting your house in order first,
Yeah.
aligning the tech work with the company's values, legal duties, that sort of thing.
Precisely. It covers a lot, like making sure you understand all the relevant laws and regulations for your specific AI use case. That's Govern 1.1 in the document.
Okay.
And it's about taking those big ideas of trustworthy AI, fairness, privacy, safety, transparency, and actually writing them into your company policies, your internal guidelines. That's Govern 1.2.
And also figuring out organizationally how much risk you're actually okay with for different things, your risk tolerance.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Defining that level of risk management needed based on your risk tolerance is key. And Govern ensures you have clear accountability. Who owns AI risk? The framework points to senior leadership having that ultimate responsibility.
Which connects back to the diversity point we were just talking about, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
Govern 3.1 explicitly mentions prioritizing workforce diversity because, like we said, diverse teams make better decisions, especially when the risks are complex.
It also seems to push for a certain mindset.
Yeah, fostering a culture of critical thinking, safety-first approach, making sure people feel safe raising concerns. That's Govern 4.1.
And it looks like govern isn't just internal, it covers interactions outside the organization too.
Right. Talks about engaging properly with external folks, maybe partners, maybe communities affected by the AI.
Yeah.
And crucially, managing risks from third-party stuff.
Like software or data you buy or integrate.
Exactly. Govern 6.1 and 6.2 deal with that. Supply chain risk is a big deal in AI, just like anywhere else.
So govern is truly the bedrock. It's ongoing. It enables everything else.
It's the infrastructure for trust and responsibility, yeah.
Okay, so once the govern foundation is sort of in place, how do you start looking at a specific AI system? Where do the risks actually lie? That sounds like the MA function.
That's MP, establishing context, framing the risk for that specific system. This is where you get down to what's it supposed to do? How might it actually be used or misused? Who gets impacted? What gets impacted?
This feels like where the sheer complexity of AI could really become apparent, trying to predict all the ripples.
It is tricky. AI systems don't exist in a vacuum, right? Their contexts are complex, visibility can be limited sometimes. So anticipating impacts is hard. MAP is designed to help you grapple with that uncertainty.
So what kinds of things does MAP guide you to understand?
It starts with the basics, the intended purpose,
Hmm.
but then, critically, potential uses, both good and bad, intended and unintended. You need to think about the specific settings, the users.
Yeah, and the potential impacts.
Yes, positive and negative impacts. And thinking broadly, not just on the direct user, but individuals, groups, society, even the planet, depending on the system. MAP 1.1 covers a lot of this, including documenting your assumptions and the system's limitations.
And I bet this is another place where bringing in different viewpoints is essential.
Absolutely. MAP 1.2 and 5.2 really emphasize involving interdisciplinary teams and outsiders to check your assumptions about how the system will function in context and what its effects might be. It's also where you define risk tolerance specifically for this system.
Which might be different from the overall organizational tolerance set under govern.
Could be, yeah. And you also get technical here. MAP 2.1 and 2.2 talk about categorizing the AI. What kind is it? What methods does it use?
Yeah.
And understanding its knowledge limits what doesn't it know.
You also look at the potential upsides and downsides.
Yep. Expected benefits and costs, that's MAP 3. And mapping risks and benefits for all the parts, including, again, any third-party components. That's MAP 4.
And finally, in MAP, do you start trying to size up these potential impacts?
You do. MAP talks about characterizing impacts, thinking about likelihood and magnitude.
Yeah.
You draw on expected uses, but also past experience, incident reports, user feedback if available.
So the outcome of MAP is what helps.
Sufficient contextual knowledge. Enough understanding to make an initial informed decision. Do we go ahead with developing or deploying this thing or not? It really sets the stage for measure and manage.
Okay, makes sense. You've identified the potential risks, you understand the context. Next logical step seems to be, well, how bad are these risks, really? How do we quantify them? Which brings us to measure.
Exactly. Measure is where the rubber meets the road in terms of analysis. You use various tools, techniques, metrics to analyze, assess, benchmark, and monitor the risks you surfaced in VOW. If Measure was sketching the landscape, Measure is using surveying tools to get precise readings.
And this involves testing, evaluation.
Right. Rigorous TVV testing, evaluation, verification, and validation, both before you deploy it and ongoing monitoring afterwards.
What are the key activities under Measure?
Well, first, you've got to pick the right tools for the job. Measure 1.1 is about selecting appropriate methods and metrics for the risks you decided were most important back in Ember.
And then actually using them.
And using them regularly. Assessing the metrics, checking your controls are working. Measure 1.2 and 1.3 stress involving external experts and affected communities here too, getting their input on your measurements.
And a big chunk of Measure seems dedicated to checking if the AI system actually lives up to those trustworthy characteristics we keep mentioning.
That's a huge part of it, covered under Measure 2. This is where TVV really comes into play. Are you using documented test sets? Are your metrics meaningful? That's 2.1.
Are you testing it in realistic conditions?
Yep. Measuring performance in deployment-like settings, 2.3. Monitoring its actual behavior in production, 2.4. Evaluating if it's reliable and valid, 2.5. Checking if it's safe, 2.6. Assessing security and resilience against attacks, 2.7.
And the more socio-technical aspects, fairness, bias, privacy.
Absolutely vital. Measure 2.8 through 2.111 cover examining risks related to transparency, accountability, explainability, interpretability, privacy, and fairness bias. How do you measure if a system is fair? That's a huge challenge. Measure tackles. It even includes assessing environmental impact, like energy consumption, 2.12.
So Measure isn't just a pre-flight check, it's ongoing.
Definitely ongoing.
Yeah.
Measure 3 is about tracking risks over time, because AI isn't static. New risks can emerge, especially ones that are hard to measure initially. And Measure 3.3 and 4 emphasize integrating feedback loops, getting input from users and communities who might spot issues first.
And the outcome of all this measuring.
You have objective documented results from your testing and monitoring. You understand the risks much better. And all this data, all these findings, they feed directly into the next function, manage.
Right, manage. This sounds like where you decide what to do about the risks you've mapped and measured, the action phase.
That's it exactly. Manage is about prioritizing those risks and then taking concrete steps to treat them. It's about allocating resources, planning responses, figuring out recovery, communication, all the practical management stuff.
So using everything you learned in map and measure to make the call proceed or not.
That's Manage 1.1, making that determination based on the risk assessment outcomes. And if you do proceed, Manage 1.2 is about prioritizing which risks need attention first, based on impact and likelihood.
And then coming up with actual plans for those high priority risks.
Yes. Developing, planning, and documenting your responses.
Yeah.
That could be mitigation, putting in controls. It could be transferring the risk, maybe via insurance. It could be deciding to avoid the risk by not doing something.
Or just accepting it.
Or consciously accepting some level of residual risk. But if you do that, Manage 1.4 says you need to document those remaining risks, especially for downstream users who might be affected.
Does manage also look at the positive side, like maximizing the benefits?
It does. Manage 2.1 talks about planning strategies to get the most benefit while minimizing harm, considering your resources, maybe looking at alternatives. And crucially, Manage 2.4 covers having mechanisms ready to step in, override, disengage, or even shut down a system if it's performing badly or causing unacceptable harm. An off switch, basically.
What about those third-party risks we keep mentioning? How does manage handle those?
Through ongoing monitoring and management, covered in Manage 3, you need to keep tabs on those external components. And Manage 4 is huge. It's about implementing post-deployment monitoring, incident response plans, recovery plans.
So it's not deploy and forget.
Absolutely not. Manage 4.2 emphasizes continual improvement updates, patches, ongoing engagement. And 4.3 is about communication, telling people about incidents or errors, having clear tracking and response processes.
So the result of manage is having these concrete action plans ready for prioritizing, monitoring, improving.
Exactly. Plans for dealing with risk, plans for continuous oversight, plans for making the system better over time. It closes that loop, but it's a continuous loop.
Okay, that covers the 4 core functions. Govern sets the stage, MPay understands the context, measure assesses the risks, and manage takes action. But part 2 also has this other key concept, profiles. What are those about?
Profiles. Yeah, these are really interesting. Think of them as the way you customize the AIRMF core for your specific situation. They're implementations of the functions, categories, subcategories, but tailored for a particular setting or application.
So instead of just the general framework, you might create, say, an AI RMF profile for customer service chatbots, or one for medical image analysis.
Exactly. The framework gives examples like a hiring profile or a fair housing profile. Profiles help you make the RMF concrete and operational. They guide you on how to manage risk in your context, aligning with your goals, resources, legal needs.
Makes it practical.
Very practical. And the framework talks about a specific type, temporal profiles.
Temporal, meaning time-based.
Right. You can create a current state profile.
Yeah.
This is how we manage AI risk now. And then you define a desired target state profile. This is where we want to be.
I see. And comparing the two.
Instantly shows you the gaps where you're falling short of your target. This gap analysis is super useful for creating action plans, prioritizing improvements. It gives you a roadmap for getting better at AI risk management, and it's risk-based and cost-effective.
Are there other kinds of profiles?
Yep, they mention cross-sectoral profiles too. These are good for risks related to AI models or applications used across different areas, like maybe a large language model that lots of different teams use, or for common activities, like using cloud AI services.
So profiles are the flexible adapter, letting you plug the RMF core into your specific needs, whether it's one application, a whole technology class, or just figuring out where you stand right now.
That's a good way to put it. And NIST doesn't dictate how you format these profiles, again, emphasizing flexibility. Make them work for you.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of part 2 then. It gives us the real toolkit, the engine room. You've got the core functions, govern, map, measure, manage. That's your ongoing process.
For systematically finding, assessing, and dealing with AI risks.
And then you've got profiles, which are the way you tailor that whole process to your specific world and track how you're doing.
And throughout it all, running underneath everything is that need for diverse perspectives. Bringing in different views is key to making this whole framework actually effective in building trustworthy AI.
It really feels like a comprehensive, systematic way to approach a very complex area.
It is. It's designed to bring structure to something that's evolving incredibly fast.
Which actually brings me to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. Given how fast AI is evolving and how this framework is meant to be iterative, how can organizations do more than just keep up with the risks we can see and measure now? How do we start to proactively anticipate the risks that are maybe just over the horizon, the ones we don't even have good ways to measure yet?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Moving from reactive risk management to something more predictive, or at least anticipatory.
Yeah. So think about that in your own context. Where could these ideas govern, map, measure, manage, profiles apply to what you do or what you're interested in? How might this structured thinking help navigate the future of AI?